Hi, I'm Josh, and welcome to another day of vlogmas. Today, I'm going to be giving you my 10 most disappointing reads of 2020. So. This list was originally going to be the worst books of 2020, but I thought it was easier to give you disappointed reads because it's harder to say this book is objectively the worst than it is to say this book just was not what I wanted it to be, because it's like much more personal, and I think also it says more about my taste than it does about the book itself, so keep that in mind. The first book was a book that I read in January. It ended up DNFing, I think, at 70%. Still counting it as read. It's called Underland by Macfarlane. This book is supposed to be about an exploration of everything Underland, from science to mythology, and I thought it was going to be an exploration, or rather a tying in of both the mythological side with the scientific side, but instead it really wasn't what I wanted it to be at all. But a lot of people love this book. It's very highly praised, and I understand that. It's just not what I wanted. This book is less a science or educational book than it is like a travel book. This guy doesn't really have much of a cohesive story here. He just takes a series of trips that he made to certain locations that are very tangentially related at times to the Underland or underground, and then uses that as sort of a starting off point to discuss some tangential science or some tangential mythological or historical context to, again, the Underland. And it all just felt very forced. It was neither like an anthropological or mythological exploration, nor was it a scientific one. It was just a way of talking about different locations with a central theme, and it was not at all what I wanted, which is so disappointing because this book sounded so good and it looks so gorgeous. And the next book, this one, honestly, if I was doing a worst books of 2020, this one might actually make the list too, and that is All I Want Todays by Elan Mastai, I don't know. He's a Canadian author who wrote a book about time travel and multiverses. I just had so much wrong with this. I don't think the writing was particularly bad. Like, I did like it for the most part, and I felt like there was so much I could have loved. In fact, I loved the ideas that he worked with here. I just felt like he failed to do anything with it. First off, the character work was terrible. The relationships that he had with certain people, like a romantic relationship, felt so fucking forced. It was not good. The use of this time travel mechanic and multiverse or sort of alternate reality type scenario did not feel like it was very well used. It's been a while since I've read it, but I want to say it's something to do with he was trying to sell a message, and that message just felt very forced, not very nuanced. And oh yeah, he also, there's a lot of toxic masculinity in here, and I think he was trying to use it to have a conversation about it, but it was just so heavy-handed that it wasn't done well. It was, I mean, it's not as bad as, say, Stephen King, who uses toxic topics or toxic ideas for the flash value. It seems like he's trying to do a bit more than that, but still, he's not doing it very successfully. I think a lot of the problems I had were the societal questions he was trying to ask and he failed to ask, the character work and the relationships he was trying to foster, and as well as the time travel mechanic. The logic behind it didn't make sense. I don't remember what it was. I just remember hating it. If you go back to one of my I think it was August or July Friday reads, I had a visceral reaction to this. It was just so, I despised it so much because it had the potential to be so good. It really could have, and it failed me. Next up is a book I read Marchish, I don't know. Conquest of Happiness by Bertrand. Bertrand Russell was a philosopher, and he is known for a lot of his philosophical works relating to religion and morality, and I wanted to read his books for a while because he's basically like a central person in the atheistic community and the skeptic community as well, in this sort of critique of religion and sort of the secular movement in general, and I know his works are very highly respected. This was one I had not heard a lot about, and I thought, okay, cool, a book out in the nature of happiness. I thought it might be very insightful. In fact, I remember I bought it and I read the first few pages of the first chapter or so, and I was like, oh, this is really intriguing start. And when I finally read it, God damn it, the ideas themselves, very antiquated, very antiquated. They were sexist, they were racist. Do not recommend this book at all. But on top of that, even ignoring the aspects that were objectively racist and sexist, if it wasn't bigoted, it was just obvious shit. It was with no real insight. It was such a disappointment, a huge, huge disappointment. And also, just really bad. This is part of the reason I don't read self-help books. I do not like them. I do not like Green Eggs and Ham. Next is a book that I did not hate. In fact, I was trying to get to books that I liked in some ways, but this one is going to be Dracula by Bram Stoker, and this was one I had high hopes for, but ultimately it felt dry, it felt slow, and it wasn't enough Dracula. The scenes with Dracula were well done. The scenes outside there just felt like a slog. It was hard to get through personally. And I think part of it might have been the Victorian setting as well as the letter format. It all came together to make it a really tough read and one that made it hard for me to get invested in. Next is an author who I adore, or rather who I have adored, and who I'm hoping I'll still like. This book right here, Charlie Jane Anders, The City in the Middle of the Night. And this is a sci-fi book about this group of people who went to this exoplanet, this world that is away from Earth, to settle, and it's basically tidally locked. Basically meaning when you're so close to the sun, like the moon is to the Earth, that one face stays locked towards its parent body. And in this, you can imagine one side's going to be very cold, one's going to be very warm. There's some political intrigue as well as some really interesting astrobiology or just alien life conversations. And I felt like the setting was really well done. And the point she was trying to make here, I feel like, was really good. Like, there was a lot to love here, but this short book felt way too long. The first section of the book, the first half of the book, or maybe first 2/3, it felt like a YA drama, and I felt like the pacing could have been better. The character work, they all felt like children, and I think they may have been young adults, but still, the dialect just wasn't for me. It was just really hard for me I was just annoyed by it, very annoyed by it. So with the pacing and just the way the story was structured is the problem. The ideas are intriguing, but the story itself immensely dissatisfying. And next is Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. And this one got the short end of the stick because I read it right after another book that was a similar idea, like a summary of everything we know about the universe. This one just wasn't nearly as good. The writing wasn't as well done. It's dated, and in general, I just didn't feel like there was much to appreciate in here. And part of that, I think, really stems from his inability to really convey the science very well. I've talked a lot about this recently, so I won't get too much into it. Next up, Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. Mitch Albom is someone I've avoided since I've become an atheist because he's super Christian, and I was worried this might be super Christian, which I wouldn't say it was, but it was very Hallmark. And I loved this book in high school, but now I came back to it after death of my family, hoping I would be able to use it as some comfort. It's a nonfiction book about this interviews Mitch Albom had with his old teacher, Morrie whatever, who was dying of, I don't remember what it was. I want to say it was the same disease as Stephen Hawking had. And he's supposed to be giving ideas about the nature of appreciating life and accepting death, blah, blah, blah. And I felt like this was on the verge of a self-help book, and I did not find the ideas particularly unique or particularly insightful. And coming to this 10 years later than I did when I first read it, I also recognize that some of the ideas they're really just his opinions. Like, when I was in high school, it felt so profound because they were consistent with my own way of thinking. But now I recognize not much to it. While he seemed like a nice guy and some of the ideas are nice, it just was not that great. Next up, an April read, I believe, and this was a book that I read when reading Ariel Basset's favorite books. And I had such high hopes. I thought I would love this, and I did not, needless to say. An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. And to summarize this book, it is an absolutely unremarkable thing by Hank Green. This book is far too YA. It centers around this sort of first contact thing, some kind of alien coming to Earth, except it sort of descends like it's almost like Transformer-esque robot to the surface, and it centers around this one girl, this YouTuber, who gets super popular when she sort of YouTubes it, and she starts getting really popular. And then the story starts progressing as she starts to learn, the world starts to learn what these machines are. And ultimately, I thought the book itself wasn't very unique. It felt like a mashup of Carl Sagan's Contact and Transformers. Contact was just a better first contact story than this. It's just much better. The main character was annoying. The writing was not very... I just didn't like the writing because it was definitely very YA in a way that I just couldn't connect to. Not that YA is bad, it's just this type of writing is just not my style. I also didn't much care about our main character because this super popular girl has to deal with her popularity. And I understand how someone like Ariel Basset, who's super popular, could relate to this conversation. Just for me, as someone who's not that, I just really couldn't care less. And everything about this, the main character, the ideas that were in the story, and also just the basic premise, did not feel very unique to it, and it was just an immense disappointment. I really thought I would love this, honestly. Like, I truly did. One of the biggest disappointments of the year, that book was. Which I guess I would say that all of these was sort of, like, were getting progressively more disappointing. My disappointment for The Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern kind of started before I read it, because I had heard some sort of negative reviews, so I kind of went into it with a sort of depreciated expectations. But nevertheless, I had bought it initially, super excited, because I loved The Night Circus. Granted, I read it like nearly 10 years ago now, but this story was so long and so unfocused. Like, I love the atmosphere, beautiful atmosphere, great characters, great narrator of the audiobook. But the story itself, Jesus Christ, there's no story. It was just like ramblings. I couldn't. Now this last one I have to give some context to, because I don't want people to get the wrong impression. I did really like this book, and it's a part of a series that I intend on continuing. And in fact, I plan on rereading this book because of my disappointment with it the first go around. But The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I am ashamed. I know, it's so popular. I struggled starting out with this. I ended up really appreciating the story and loving how everything connected. I'm excited to read the next book now. And honestly, I'm going to reread this before I do that, because there were so many details early on that I had trouble connecting to. This book is so dense. It's over 1,000 pages. This is the first half, by the way. The first half of the book. And what am I trying to say? There was so much being thrown at me that I just could not take it in. And because of that, the first part of the story just felt like a slog. It felt really hard to get into and really boring. And even the main characters I was to follow, I was like, where the fuck is this going? It's just so long and so slow and so convoluted. It felt like it was focusing more on world building than it was on actual character development for most of the book. And personally, it's like I'm less interested in the world building than I am in either the plot and or the characters, probably more the characters. And we do get the character work eventually. Like that turns into that, which I really liked. But I just did not like how we started this book. I was just really disappointed. I thought I might just DNF it. I thought I might not read the next one. I was terrified I was going to hate this book. And luckily it got better, or rather I appreciated it more. But it just, oh Jesus, it was just so much. And I still have some critiques here. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I obviously not retain everything. But like, this book has like 3 main characters, but there were a prologue, there's an epilogue, there's an endnotes, and then there are these interludes in between each 4 parts. And these interludes are like novellas unto themselves. I get they connect to the bigger story, but are they really relevant to this story? That's what I have to ask, because like, take Earthsea, Wizards of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. She has novellas that relate to that series, but you know what? Those are published independently of those novels. You know, it's going to throw them into the novel to make the novel longer. I just don't see why this book couldn't have been shorter, and he just sort of published independent things that were related to the Stormlight Archive tangentially. I would love to have a conversation here, because I'm sure there are plenty of you who have read this book. Tell me in the comments if I'm missing something. Try not to spoil it for myself or anyone else, but like, remind me or clarify if you think that these interludes, or at least some of them, were necessary to give context to the story that we're following, because I don't think they were. We get so much backstory, so much details related to our main characters, the characters of the story, that I don't think we needed that extra information just yet. And I feel like it would have made more sense to let me read this, appreciate the world, and then go from there and go to these sort of external stories with my excitement and my pre-existing information or understanding of the world, to then be able to really appreciate the added detail that he wants to add in with these interludes. I wouldn't say that book was the most disappointing, but it was definitely the most shocking disappointment. Even though to be clear, I liked The Way of Kings. I gave it 4 stars, solid 4 stars. And I could even see myself giving it more after I reread it. But I just had problems with it, especially the first go around. And part of that is me, right? I recognize that for really complex, detailed books, I have a hard time obtaining all the details that I need. And sometimes I have to reread it to really appreciate it. But nevertheless, a disappointment. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think, whether if you liked any of these books. As always, I hope you have a great day and a happy holiday, and I will see you next time. Assuming this isn't my last video. I'm not sure when this video is going up, but good day.